Hello. Welcome to my tier ranking list for Final Fantasy XIV. In this video, we are going to be putting the jobs together in ranks, fighting game style. While this list truly is my opinion of how the jobs should be ranked, it is my opinion and shouldn't be taken as the gospel. I'm always up for discussion in the comments section as I enjoy debating these kinds of things. Finally, 14 is not a fighting game and this kind of ranking isn't perfect. However, I think this is good fun to have anyway. There is no truly utterly weak job in this game and all of them can clear content. The balance right now is probably better than it ever has been in this game's history. But some jobs do have clear weaknesses or strengths that make them less or more desirable in a party, and I just want to elaborate on these things. While it is late in the expansion, I think there's no better time than to talk about this, since all jobs have received their final buffs. Now that we've talked about everything, let's dive into this list. You may have noticed that I've placed nothing in D tier. I legitimately think no job is truly that bad in Final Fantasy XIV. Yes, not even Machinist. Maybe in previous expansions I would have considered placing a job or two there. But in Stormblood it is not the case at all. First we start off with the bottom of the list, White Mage. White Mage has critical issues that place it at the bottom of the list and, in my opinion, it is the worst job in the game. For starters, White Mage lacks a wide variety of OGCD heals and its kit. In fact, White Mage's kit revolves around the usage of GCD heals with Lilith and Confession stacks to even unlock its more powerful OGCD heals. Because of this, it loses more cast that could be used on damage spells and therefore it falls behind on damage. This wouldn't be so much of an issue if the other healers didn't outclass it in damage and also provide utility. White Mage brings absolutely nothing but its big dick heals to the party. But as the saying goes, it's not about the size, but how you use it, and White Mage doesn't even do that right. The other two healers bring multiple sources of utility and still achieve higher damage numbers than White Mage. Since White Mage's size has been buffed, it has come closer to closing that damage gap, but it is still the weakest healer. This doesn't mean White Mage doesn't have some awesome skills that the other two healers wish they could have. White Mage has Tetragrammaton, a not bad single target heal, off the GCD with a cooldown of 60 seconds. White Mage has Divine Benison, an excellent shield that is on a cooldown of 30 seconds. The shield equals 15% of the target's HP, which is very respectable, especially on a tank. The other healers honestly wish they had this skill. White Mage also has the most godlike OGCD heal that is Benediction. On a 180 second cooldown, this ability will heal up the target, equaling the amount of HP that the target has. This is extremely convenient for ultimate cooldowns like Living Dead and Holmgang, that leave the tank at 1 HP. Not to forget that Benediction lines up perfectly with Holmgang's cooldown. It also has Asylum, a seriously strong regen bubble that, again, is off the GCD. This is excellent for topping people up instead of using something like Medica 2, a GCD regen AoE heal. White Mage also has a size which is a damage and healing skill that hits in a massive AoE. It also regenerates some MP for the White Mage when used. It is on a 45 second cooldown and is one of White Mage's best skills and hits like a goddamn train. Finally, White Mage has Plenary Indulgence, a skill that is locked behind all of White Mage's AoE GCD heals. Depending on how many times you AoE heal, increases the strength of Plenary Indulgence, healing anyone who has Confession stacks on them. It is essentially a potency increase on whatever AoE heal you just casted, and that is always welcome. You're probably wondering why I said White Mage was weak on the off GCD game, despite me naming all of these excellent skills. You sorry fool. Yes, White Mage has these wonderful skills, but not only are they not as great as the other healers off global cooldowns, but White Mage is the only healer that has to clip its GCD most of the time to even access these skills. This was the same issue that Astrologian had, however SE fixed that by shortening the cast time of Astro, allowing them to weave every GCD. This made Astro broken beyond belief. But White Mage is still shafted by this issue. Because of the continuous clipping, White Mage loses even more cast that could be spent on damage. If this issue alone was fixed, I feel that White Mage would be a strong competitor and probably an A tier healer, but SE has decided that it has to keep its fantasy of being the powerful main healer. So keep role playing that you're good White Mages, that will make your problems go away. The main reason why it's C tier is because it is the only job that truthfully doesn't achieve its intended job of being a high damage, heavy healing healer. The only reason it isn't D tier is because it works perfectly fine if you just want to clear and has a very welcoming ease of use to it. Otherwise, this is where it will stay. Next on the list at the bottom of B tier is Samurai. I'm sure a bunch of you dirty casuals probably thought I'd place Samurai lower than D tier. But no, Samurai is a very decent job that has its place in 14's class lineup. Samurai is an excellently designed job in terms of how it feels to play. It's fluid and easy to understand, and it allows you to do high damage even if you're brain dead or if you mess up. The reason Samurai is on the lower end of the spectrum is because, while it pumps out very high damage as it should, it is not entirely enough to compete with the higher tiers of this list. It is very close in this regard but not quite close enough. However, what makes Samurai stand out from White Mage just a bit more is that while its design doesn't allow it to compete in the highest of play, Samurai is excellent in parties that don't utilize buffs properly. Think of your typical and horrible 09s weekly. Playing ninja in a party like that is a total disaster, especially if you're 2 to 3000 DPS higher than the next DPS. Your trick attacks will provide little to nothing if no one even cares to line up their burst with it. However, with Samurai, you can place the party on your shoulders, assuring them that it's nothing personal, and carry them to victory. Samurai's offensive kit is absolutely relentless, delivering consistently high potency numbers. Get ready to cringe, because this TTS bot is absolutely pathetic at saying Japanese words. Samurai revolves around managing two of its gauge resources, Kenki and Sense. With your high potency Enders, Gecko, Kasha, and Ukikes, you can build up 3 different Sens with your respective combo Ender, to use a specific and powerfully Ijutsu skill. With one Sen, you have the powerful dot, Hidden Banner, a 60-second dot that when buffed with Kaiten, can reach around 1400 potency during its duration. You have Tenkago, a respectable cone AoE of 360 potency, but isn't always your best option for AoE anyway, as we'll get to your Hisatsu skills. And for your finally Ijutsu, and the most powerful skill in your arsenal, you have Midair Setsujeka, a ridiculously potent single target weapon skill. Buffed solely with Kaiten, you are looking at 1080 potency in an instant. It is the hardest hitting skill in the game. While midair crits less than your Hakes in an encounter, you can expect well into the mid 60k damage range at maximum eye level. Moving on to your Hisatsu skills, you have Shinton, or 300 potency single target move that is basically your bread and butter OGCD. You will spam this over and over, shanking your target like you're defending yourself from a prison gangbang. You have Q10, the AoE counterpart to Shinton. It is half the potency of Shinton but is an excellent AoE spamming skill, and is generally better than Tenkagoken depending on how many targets there are. With proper preparation, combined with the next skill, this makes Samurai quite decent at AoE, but nothing too powerful. Samurai has the ability Gurren, a devastating 800 potency line AoE with just as devastating AoE fall off. It still hits incredibly hard and is still a very powerful skill on a single target anyway. Finally, you have Segan. This skill can only be used when Merciful Eyes is activated, and is essentially a more efficient Shinton, but not by too much. Moving outside of Hisatsu and Sen skills, you have Mikayo Shizu, a skill that allows you to execute any weapon skill you want outside of combo requirements. It is excellent for dishing out high damage while rapidly building up Sens. You can also combo this with Hagakure, a very powerful ability that allows you to convert Sens into Kenki. All of these skills combine into a beautiful rotation of absolute destruction. However, even though Samurai is a masterpiece of job design, it simply just isn't powerful enough. It truly is its only issue in my opinion. While it will probably always output the highest damage in a party, I believe its issue is that it lacks the consistency of the Black Mage's relentless damage. While Black Mage can constantly use fire for having dips in damage where it should in its ice rotation, you have moves like Hackes that will steal your crit rate from midair, leaving you feeling like you haven't actually outputted enough damage to deserve your party slot. And then you have to explain to your party members that your crit rate may be high but it was nothing but Hackes and auto attacks, and then they tell you to switch to Monk. Quite frankly, Samurai just needs more buffs. It's been an uphill battle for the job the whole of the expansion, but I believe that it can reach the top. Samurai's B tier for now, but as Black Mage shows that raw damage is a job design that can prove itself to be absolutely meta crushing, I believe Samurai can achieve that dream with more tweaks. Next up is Machinist, the job that has been a problem child the whole expansion. Machinist was designed so poorly that at one of the recent FanFest, Yoshi P publicly apologized for how bad it has been. It is the least played job in Stormblood, and quite frankly, I don't blame anyone for not wanting to play it. Machinist has a plethora of issues that I will try to get into, but I'm sure they're more than I even know to list. It is a very clunky job and has trouble in many fights. Machinist's biggest problem is its heat gauge. This was a system that Machinist honestly did not need but was thrown on in Stormblood because Square Enix decided every job needed a gauge. The heat gauge is ridiculously rigid and makes Machinist the least flexible job in the game. Machinist also has an issue with players with higher ping. Because of how tight the overheat window is, and how short the GCD during rapid fire is, players tend to clip no matter what they do, losing damage on their 6th GCD. Its most iconic skill, Wildfire, is a great concept that compiles all their damage within 10 seconds and deals a percentage of that burst into more damage. But of course, the boss will jump before that goes off anyway, so why does it matter? The heat gauge and Wildfire also do not work well with adds with low amounts of health. Most likely you'll kill the ad before Wildfire goes off with your burst, or you'll have to use cooldown to push your burst back more. Most jobs don't have this problem and can easily transition between ads and boss. Brook Overload is also a very satisfying skill to use even if it is damage neutral, meaning it's only a damage gain under buffs. This is because when using this skill, it destroys your turret, leaving you unable to use your turret for 30 seconds. Meaning you lose 30 seconds of turret auto attacks. This isn't too much of an issue as the skill has no problem lining up with buffs including the turret's own buff, Hypercharge. However, because the turret destroys itself, you have to resummon it every time you blow it up instead of it just coming back up on its own. This can be a huge annoyance, especially if you don't like using macros to weave your skills in. Think about it like this. Summoner can summon Bahamut, and when they're finished with him, their pet instantly respawns and continues doing damage. So why was Machinist not offered this as well? You're probably wondering why this job is higher up in B tier than Samurai, since I hold Samurai in such a high regard due to its class design. Well, simply put, despite all of Machinist's rotational flaws, it is a very good DPS to have in your party. We mentioned Hypercharge earlier, and we can't talk about Machinist without talking about its best party buff. Hypercharge is a 5% vulnerability up debuff that, depending on which turret is out, can be placed on one target or multiple targets in an AoE. It affects all damage types and has the ability to last almost 30 seconds, which is extremely valuable. Machinist also has quite high personal damage on its own, competing with the likes of Red Mage and slightly just under Monk depending on the fight. However, going back to its rotational issues, they can seriously gimp how Machinist performs no matter how good you are at the job. Because of this, Machinist is in the middle of B tier as being a bit situational with how good it can be, due to its very clunky design. At the tip top of B tier we have my personal favorite tank in Stormblood, the Dark Knight. Dark Knight has had a complicated upbringing through Stormblood since launch. Its cooldown loadout was weaker for no apparent reason, and a few of its most beloved skills were removed with the skill culling from Heavensward to Stormblood. People began to think Dark Knight was boring and that it was too spammy when it came to the usage of dark arts. All the new skills they added to Dark Knight and Stormblood had seemed very underwhelming or underpowered, and they nerfed other skills and many of the nerfs seemed very unnecessary. Over time, however, they've slowly buffed the job into what it is now. Dark Knight to me is somewhat of middle ground to both tanks, a great supplement to both Warrior and Paladin. Dark Knight, like Warrior to an extent, has no problem playing any role a tank needs to play. As a main tank, its aggro generation is incredible, and you could argue it's even better than Warrior's. It has so many different aggro tools that you can use, and with the buff to Dark Passenger, you don't even need to use Dark Arts to have the extra aggro applied to it. It is always welcome to have aggro tools that are off the GCD so you can continue on with your DPS rotation. The personal cooldown set of Dark Knight is also incredibly strong. You have Shadow Wall, a 30% defensive buff at a 180 second cooldown which is on par with Warrior's Vengeance. You have Dark Mind, an absolutely incredible cooldown that is a 30% magic defense buff, that is on an extremely low cooldown of 60 seconds. You have the controversial shield skill of the Blackest Night. This skill places a shield on you with a value of 20% of the Dark Knight's HP if it is placed on the Dark Knight, or 10% HP of the Dark Knight if it is placed on another party member. Although it costs the same amount of MP as Dark Arts, when this shield is broken, it returns 50 blood gauge to you, giving you instant access to any blood gauge skill you'd like. It doubles as a defensive cooldown and, with proper management, can be used offensively as well, making it a genius skill. Leading on to Dark Knight's offensive play, it is easily the second highest damage dealing tank currently. Dark Knight focuses on a fast-paced playstyle while managing your MP and gauge to output your damage. This comes with a lot of OGCD management similar to that of a DPS, and that's what Dark Knight has always been renowned for since Heavensward. It comes with very high potency moves that make Dark Knight a very consistent hard hitter. Because of its short cooldowns, it also has no problem with things like downtime as it is immediately ready to continue where it left off. Despite all the praise I give it, Dark Knight is in top B tier for a reason. It is great at everything it does, but it doesn't excel enough at one particular thing to give it its place. Dark Knight may have an excellent defensive cooldown setup, but so does Warrior, and the raw damage Warrior puts out is even greater than Dark Knight's. Its only party utility is the Blackest Night, which, while very strong, is nowhere near as powerful as any of the Paladin's party utility. Dark Knight is also the only tank with no AoE defensives outside of usage of Reprisal. Dark Knight covers a lot of bases and is a great and flexible tank, but because it lacks an advantage of its own that it brings to the table, that the other two tanks can already cover together, it is the lowest rated tank and is in B tier. It is completely viable for any content and, in my opinion, has the best playstyle of all the tanks. We've now reached the end of the video. We've covered C through B tiers now, but we'll continue to cover the rest in another video. If we continued, this video would be 3 years long. Thank you for sticking until the end if you made it. This is a new style of video that I am trying to do, and feedback in the comments about the content and the style of the video would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching, and have a wonderful day.